1998, Michael Jordan left. No doubt, there are great moments in sports, and then there are moments that feel like the universe itself paused to watch. June 14th, 1998 was one of those moments. The Chicago Bulls were hanging on by a single point. The arena in Salt Lake City was shaking. The season, the dynasty, the entire identity of 1990s basketball hung in the balance. And with 5.2 seconds left, a 35-year-old Michael Jordan, exhausted, bruised, and carrying a team that had been breaking apart all year, took the ball at the top of the floor and stared down Brian Russell. For a second, everything went silent. Every cheer, every heartbeat, every voice disappeared under the weight of a single question. Was this how the greatest player of all time would end his career? What happened over the next few seconds became one of the most replayed moments in sports history. But here is the truth. That shot wasn't just a highlight. It was the final answer to every debate, every doubt, every rival. It was the end of a battle Jordan had been fighting long before he took that dribble against injuries, age, front office chaos, and a franchise that was tearing itself apart from the inside. To understand the power of that moment, you have to understand the war Jordan walked through to get there. Section 1. The Evolution of a Predator. By the time the 1997-98 season began, Michael Jordan was no longer the young phenom who jumped over defenders just because he could. He was older, heavier, slower on some nights, but somehow more dangerous than ever. The athletic explosiveness that defined his early career had evolved into something colder and far more efficient. Jordan wasn't hunting highlights anymore. He was hunting weaknesses. After returning from baseball in 1995, he spent a summer in Hollywood filming Space Jam. Most players would treat a movie set like a vacation. Jordan treated it like a laboratory. He demanded the studio build a full training facility, weights, staff, and an NBA regulation court so he could practice after filming every single day. And whenever other NBA players visited, they noticed something strange. Jordan was obsessed with the single move, the fadeaway. It wasn't new, but he was sharpening it like a blade. Pump fake, shoulder dip, sudden stop, fall back, perfect separation. The move looked simple, but it was devastating. Because if you step back, he rose straight up and hit it. If you pressed forward, he spun off you and scored anyway. It was a veteran-esque answer to time. Losing a little vertical didn't matter when your footwork and timing were perfect. Former players began describing him with words no athlete wants to hear about their opponent, cold, methodical, Hannibal Lecter predator. At 35, Jordan wasn't just a scorer, he was a strategist. Every possession was a chess puzzle he solved before defenders even understood the opening move. And while he perfected his craft, the team around him was quietly crumbling. Section 2. The internal war that doomed the Bulls. For most teams, the biggest threats come from opponents. For the 1998 Chicago Bulls, the biggest threat came from upstairs. Everything started with one sentence a line that would echo through the entire league. Players and coaches don't win championships. Organizations win championships. It came from general manager Jerry Krause, and whether he meant it the way it sounded or not didn't matter. The damage was instant. Players took it as disrespect. Coaches took it as a warning. And the press treated it like gasoline on a fire. The Bulls were fresh off 5 championships. Jordan was the global face of sports. Phil Jackson was the architect of a dynasty. Yet Krause wanted something different. He wanted control. He wanted credit. And most dangerously, he wanted a rebuild. That decision triggered a chain reaction. Phil Jackson and Krause were already barely speaking. Their relationship collapsed completely once Krause told Phil he would not return after the season, even if the Bulls went 82-0. Jordan responded instantly. If Phil wasn't coaching, he wasn't playing. No negotiations, no discussion. Meanwhile, Scottie Pippen was furious. One of the best players in the league stuck on a 7-year, $18 million contract. By 1997, nearly every role player in the NBA was making more than him. Trade rumors swirled. He called out management publicly. He wanted a raise, respect, or a way out. Dennis Rodman, at 37, was unpredictable. Steve Kerr needed a new contract. Ron Harper was aging. Other key pieces were expiring. And instead of holding the dynasty together, ownership sided with Krause. The front office was ready to tear everything down before the season even began. The players wanted one last run. Management wanted a fresh start. Jordan stood in the middle, trying to lead a team that was being dismantled piece by piece. This wasn't just a championship chase, it was a countdown to destruction. Section 3, The Last Dance begins. Chaos, injuries, a slow bleed. The season didn't begin like a championship run, it began like a funeral march. Phil Jackson opened training camp with a simple message to his players. This is the last dance. Everyone knew exactly what that meant. No second chances, no guaranteed future, no safety net if things went wrong. And almost immediately things went wrong. Scottie Pippen, still angry about his contract and exhausted after years of being underpaid, delayed his foot surgery until right before the season. It was his silent protest, his way of saying, "You undervalue me? Fine. You can start the season without me." He wasn't just injured, he was done with the front office. Without their second superstar, the Bulls looked nothing like champions. They stumbled to a shaky 9-7 record, a shocking contrast to the unstoppable force that once won 72 games. Their offense stalled, their defense sagged. Every night felt like a grind. And it wasn't just Pippen. Steve Kerr fractured his collarbone. Luke Longley battled knee issues. Role players came and went from the injury list like it was a revolving door. The only constant was Michael Jordan, the one man who refused to miss time, refused to slow down, refused to let the entire thing collapse. He played night after night with the pressure of a falling empire on his back. The media could smell blood. Reporters circled the team daily, asking about feuds, contracts, drama, and the end of the dynasty. But the players didn't quit. Even through chaos, Chicago began to steady themselves. The rust faded, the rhythm returned. Even without Pippen, they clawed their way back to relevance. And if the front office wanted to rebuild the moment the season ended, the players were determined to make that ending unforgettable. Because once Pippen returned, everything changed. Section 4. The Bulls reload and take back the season. When Scottie Pippen finally returned in January, it felt like the Bulls had been holding their breath for 2 months. His first few games were rocky timing off, conditioning shaky, chemistry uneven, but the impact was immediate. Pippen wasn't just a scorer, he was Chicago's Swiss Army knife, their defensive anchor, their point forward, their emotional pulse. And the moment he stepped back into the lineup, the Bulls stopped looking like a team trying to survive and started looking like themselves again. Jordan's burden lightened just enough for the offense to flow again. The ball moved, roles settled, the triangle offense breathed again. From January onward, Chicago found a rhythm that felt familiar. They ripped through the league with a 15-4 run, reminding everyone what championship DNA looks like. And then came February, their strongest month of the season. The the Bulls lost only 2 games, locking in on both ends of the floor. The drama with management didn't disappear, but inside the locker room, the message was simple: ignore the noise, win anyway. By March, Chicago hit full stride. They closed the season with a 13-game win streak, moving like a veteran machine that knew exactly how to pace itself for a deep playoff run. Every night, Jordan set the tone not with highlight dunks, but with ruthless consistency. Mid-range jumpers, footwork, post fades, big shots when it mattered. He wasn't chasing numbers, he was chasing control. By the end of the regular season, Jordan had once again led the league in scoring 28.7 points per game, his 10th scoring title. He made All-NBA First Team, All-Defense First Team, and won his 5th MVP, proving that even at 35, no one in the league could match his two-way dominance. The Bulls finished the season 62-20 first in their division, first in the East, and still one of the best defensive teams in basketball, despite missing key players for months. While the front office quietly prepared for a rebuild, Jordan had been preparing for something else entirely. One more war. One more run. One more proof that he was still the standard. And the moment the playoffs began, he reminded the league why you never bet against him. Section 5. The Playoff Gauntlet. New Jersey, Charlotte, the Indiana War. Once the postseason tipped off, Michael Jordan did what he always did. He shifted into a different gear. The regular season was survival. The playoffs were conquest. Everything sharpened. Everything tightened. And every team that stood in front of Chicago felt the weight of a dynasty fighting for its final breath. The first round was quick and cruel. The New Jersey Nets walked in with optimism and walked out with reality. Jordan averaged 36 points per game, dismantling them possession by possession. It wasn't a dramatic, it wasn't a flashy, it was efficient domination. 3 games, 3 wins. One statement: even at 35, Jordan still controlled the pace of the postseason. The second round brought the Charlotte Hornets a tougher, more physical team with deeper scoring options. But the Bulls handled them in 5 games. Jordan averaged nearly 30 points a night, slicing up their defense while Pippen and Rodman tightened the screws on the other end. Every counter Charlotte threw at them, Chicago answered with something sharper. The Bulls were not just advancing, they were gathering momentum. Then came Indiana. The Eastern Conference Finals weren't just a basketball series. They were a fistfight disguised as strategy. The Pacers weren't the most talented team Jordan ever faced, but they were the most relentless. They were disciplined, fearless, and coached with military precision. Reggie Miller talking trash. Dale Davis and Antonio Davis bruising in the paint. Mark Jackson controlling tempo like a chess master. The Pacers didn't back down, not for a single possession. The series stretched to 7 games, the only time in the Bulls' championship years a conference final lasted that long. Every game felt like it could swing the season. Every run felt like a turning point. But through all the pressure, Chicago held their ground. Game 7 at the United Center was pure tension. The score tied at 79, 5 minutes left. Seasons, legacies, and futures hanging on every possession. Jordan, exhausted but unbreakable, pushed the Bulls forward. Pippen hit a crucial late layup to give Chicago the lead. Rodman battled for every rebound, like the ball owed him money. And the defense shut Indiana down entirely. The Pacers didn't score again. Jordan finished with 28 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists, dragging Chicago through the fire and back into the finals one last time. The East was conquered. The dynasty survived its toughest test yet. But waiting on the other side wasn't just a good team. It was a disciplined machine built for precision and revenge. The Utah Jazz rested, confident and ready to erase the memory of 1997. Section 6. The Finals. Utah's precision versus Jordan's instinct. The Utah Jazz weren't intimidated by Chicago. They were irritated. For a full year, they'd listened to the narrative that they only lost the 1997 finals because they didn't have home court advantage. They believed they were the better team. They believed they were tougher, more disciplined, more prepared. And unlike Chicago, they entered the 1998 finals rested, healthy and hungry after sweeping the Lakers in 4 games. 9 days of rest versus a Bulls team limping out of a 7-game war with Indiana. On paper, Utah had every edge, but paper never accounted for Michael Jordan. Still, the Jazz were built differently than most teams. Karl Malone was the reigning MVP, a physical, relentless scorer with a game polished from every angle. John Stockton was the master of timing, precision, and flawless decision-making. Jerry Sloan coached them like a military unit. No shortcuts, no ego, no wasted motion. Utah didn't beat teams with flash, they beat them with discipline. Game 1 in Salt Lake City proved that. The arena roared like a jet engine. Stockton and Malone executed their two-man game with robotic accuracy. The Jazz squeezed out an 88-85 win, and the narrative began forming. Chicago looked tired, old, vulnerable. But Jordan wasn't having any of it. 2 nights later, in Game 2, he walked into that same building and dropped 37 points, stealing back home court with a 93-88 win. He didn't celebrate. He didn't taunt the crowd. He simply walked off the floor like a man who knew the series had just turned. Then came Game 3. What happened that night wasn't a basketball, it was demolition. Chicago beat the Jazz 96-54, a 42-point blowout, the largest margin in NBA Finals history. Utah looked stunned, suffocated, helpless. Their discipline system fell apart the moment Chicago punched first. Their precision became predictability, and Jordan smelled blood. Game 4 was closer, but the result was the same. Bulls, 86 Jazz, 82. Chicago took a crushing 3-1 lead. The dynasty was 1 win away from its 6th title. The Jazz were pushed to the edge of elimination. But Utah wasn't done. Back home for Game 5 with their season on the line, they clawed out a gritty 83-81 win. The Bulls missed shots late. The Jazz tightened the screws. And suddenly, the story wasn't over. A Game 6 was coming in Utah with a crowd ready to swallow the roof. Everyone watching could feel it. Chicago didn't want a Game 7 on the road. Their legs were heavy. Their roster was bruised. And Utah was too disciplined to give anything away. The dynasty needed one last masterpiece, one last push, one last night of Michael Jordan magic. And what happened next became a chapter in basketball mythology. Section 7. Game 6. Fatigue, pressure. The calculated push to the end. Game 6 didn't feel like a basketball game. It felt like a countdown. The Delta Center crowd was louder than it had been all year, determined to drag Utah into a Game 7 by sheer force of will. The Bulls were battered, Pippen-esque back was failing, Rodman had a thumb injury, and Jordan had already carried the team through months of chaos. The only thing keeping them upright was stubbornness and muscle memory. Utah struck first. Karl Malone owned the opening quarter, bullying Chicago in the paint and giving the Jazz an early double-digit lead. The Bulls looked slow, off balance, one step behind every action, but Jordan refused to let the game slip. He scored 14 points in the first quarter alone, keeping Chicago attached by a thin thread. The second quarter was a slog long possessions, hard fouls, suffocating defense. Utah pushed the lead to 42-27, and for a moment, it looked like the Bulls' run was finally done. But this was Jordan's territory. He chipped away at the deficit with jumpers, post moves, and free throws. Nothing flashy, just pure will. By halftime, he had 23 points, and Utah's lead had shrunk to just 4. The Jazz had their chance to bury Chicago. They didn't. And Jordan felt that opening. If he had one gift besides talent, it was timing. He knew when momentum shifted. He knew when a team hesitated. And he knew how to punish them for it. As the third quarter unfolded, the Bulls continued clawing back. Pippen's back worsened. Rodman fought for every rebound like a man possessed. Jordan played selective defense, saving fuel for the final sprint. Then came the fourth quarter, a slow, grinding knife fight, where every possession felt like a career-defining moment. The score sat at 66-61, Utah ahead. Jordan looked exhausted. His jumper began falling short. His legs were fading. Assistant coach Tex Winter leaned toward Phil Jackson and said what everyone could see: his legs are gone. During a timeout, Phil didn't sugarcoat it. He told Jordan exactly what he needed to hear: stop settling, drive the ball. And Jordan listened. Down the stretch, he attacked the basket relentlessly, drawing fouls, pushing through contact, tying the game, and keeping Chicago breathing. With under a minute left, the tension was suffocating. Stockton found Malone on the block. Chicago's defense shifted. Jordan hovered behind the play, studying the angle, the rhythm, the tiny hesitation in Malone's footwork. Stockton hit a deep three. Utah went up 86-83. The arena exploded. One more stop, and the dynasty was finished. Chicago called timeout. The Bulls gathered in the huddle, tired, injured, running on fumes. And standing in the center was Jordan, calm, focused, unshakable. Phil reminded him again, if you take the jumper, follow through. Jordan nodded. This wasn't improvisation. This was calculation. Seconds later, he walked back onto the floor, knowing he would have to create something. Out of nothing again, and everything that happened next became legend. Section 8. The steal, the shot. The silence that followed. Out of the timeout, Chicago didn't draw up anything complicated. They cleared one side of the floor and handed the ball to the only man alive who wanted it in that moment. Jordan caught the inbound near half court and began dribbling slowly, almost casually, as if he was studying every heartbeat in the arena. There was no panic, no rush, just a familiar, icy calm. Utah expected him to settle for a jumper. Jordan had other plans. He exploded toward the right side, beat Brian Russell off the first step, and kissed a soft layup off the glass. 86-85. The Bulls were still alive, but Utah still had the ball and the series in their hands. Stockton brought it up with a veteran-esque patience. The crowd rose to its feet. Malone sealed his defender deep in the post. Stockton fed him exactly where he wanted it. And that S, when Michael Jordan turned into a shadow. He abandoned his man, slipped behind Malone like smoke, and in one perfectly timed swipe, ripped the ball out of his hands without touching his arm, jersey, or body. No foul, just a clean, devastating steal. For a split second, the entire arena froze. Jordan walked the ball up the court with 20 seconds left, the building drowning in noise that somehow felt silent on the broadcast. Every eye in the building, every player, every coach, every fan knew what was coming. Utah didn't double-team him. They didn't trap him. They trusted Brian Russell to stay in front. It was a fatal mistake. Jordan stood at the top of the key, letting the clock melt away. 15 seconds, 10, 8. He jabbed right. Russell lunged. Jordan drove hard, then slammed the brakes so suddenly that Russell's momentum sent him sliding helplessly past the play. Jordan rose up. Balanced, calm, textbook form. No fadeaway this time, he didn't need it. He held the follow-through just long enough for every camera on Earth to capture the silhouette. The ball dropped through the net without touching the rim. 87. 86. The Bulls had the lead. The arena didn't roar, it deflated. It sounded like 20,000 people gasping at the exact same time. Utah had one last chance. Stockton fired a deep three. The ball bounced off the rim, and history ended right there. Jordan finished the night with 45 points, scoring Chicago's final 8 points of the game. Everything the Bulls needed, every bucket, every breath, came from him. This wasn't the most athletic version of Michael Jordan. This wasn't the youngest, fastest, or strongest version. This was the purest version, the one who closed games with calculation instead of hang time, with timing instead of speed, with intelligence instead of bounce. And with that final steal and that final shot, he delivered the perfect ending. A 6th championship, a 6th finals MVP, a dynasty closed with the most iconic jumper ever taken. Jordan didn't just end a game, he ended the argument. When the buzzer sounded in Salt Lake City, Michael Jordan didn't celebrate the way most champions do. No screaming, no chest pounding, no wild victory lap. He simply walked off the floor, as if he knew the story was finished exactly the way it was always meant to end. In 6 championship seasons, 1998 was statistically his weakest. He was older, his team was injured, the front office was dismantling the roster before the season even began. And yet, he still walked away with everything. A 6th championship, a 6th finals MVP, a 10th scoring title, and a final shot so perfect it became basketball's version of a signature. A clean ending, a complete legacy. A final chapter no other superstar has ever matched. A few months later, Jordan retired, not because he was done winning, but because he had nothing left to prove. He said the mental challenge was gone. The fire that pushed him for 15 years had finally settled. And instead of fading away with age, he chose to walk out on top, untouched, unchallenged, unrivaled.